The United States has slapped punitive secondary tariffs on India over its purchase of discounted Russian oil. This deals a blow to the world's fastest growing large economy, and it deepens an ongoing rift between Washington and New Delhi. The 25% secondary tariffs come on top of a 25% reciprocal tariff. The secondary tariffs took effect at midnight US Eastern Time Wednesday, that is early Wednesday morning in India. India now faces one of the highest tariff rates in the world. US President Donald Trump's announcement earlier this month that the US would double down its tariff rate on India marked a sudden escalation of tensions. The two sides had been negotiating on a bilateral trade deal for the last 4 months, but no breakthrough was achieved. Negotiators had initially hoped that a first stage of a trade deal will be clinched by early summer, but that was not to be. Part of the reason was also that Trump was using trade as a bargaining chip to extract concessions from India in other areas. On Tuesday, Trump once again boasted of using trade to bring about a ceasefire between India and Pakistan when tensions flared up back in May during the 4 days of Operation Sindoor. It's a claim that India has vehemently denied.
I'm talking to a very terrific man, Modi of India. And they say, what's going on with you in Pakistan? Then I'm talking to Pakistan on trade. I said, what's going on with you in India? And the hatred was tremendous. Now, this has been going on for a hell of a long time. I said, I don't want to make a trade deal. No, we want to make a trade deal. I said, no, I don't want to make a trade deal with you. You're going to have a nuclear war. You guys are going to end up in a nuclear war. And that was very important to them. I said, call me back tomorrow, but we're not going to do any deals with you, or we're going to put tariffs on you that are so high. You were there, Howard, right? Yeah. You're going to put tariffs on you that was so high, I don't give a damn, your head's going to spin. You're not going to end up in a war. Within about 5 hours, it was done.
Indian analysts say that Trump's move of secondary tariffs was partly aimed at putting pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine. India has continued buying Russian oil, even though at lower levels now in the last couple of months, despite the higher tariffs. But India is the only country in the world that has been singled out for buying Russian oil, even though China buys more Russian oil than India. In 2024, India imported a little over $52 billion of Russian crude oil. China imported $10 billion more at over $62 billion. But there are no oil sanctions on China. Trade talks had also stalled, in part because of India's resistance to opening up the country's vast agriculture and dairy sectors, which are sensitive to the large farmers' vote bank. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed to never compromise with farmers, small entrepreneurs, and dairy traders. US trade negotiators were to have come to Delhi this week, but that trip was called off. In response, the Prime Minister from Ahmedabad gave a clarion call for buying Swadeshi and becoming vocal for local.
आज भारत की मेक इन इंडिया इस यात्रा में एक नया अध्याय जुड़ रहा है। ये मेक इन इंडिया, मेक फॉर द वर्ल्ड हमारे उस लक्ष्य की तरफ एक बड़ी छलांग है।
The Global Trade Research Initiative has predicted that Indian exports to the US, which is its largest trading partner, could fall from $86 billion this year to about $50 billion in 2026. That would be a shortfall of about 30%, and that could be debilitating for many small-scale industries. Textiles, gems and jewelry, shrimp and carpets would be the worst affected, with these sectors bracing for up to a 70% drop in exports. And if that were to happen, it could endanger hundreds of thousands of jobs of people who depend on these small-scale industries. Economists have forecast that the tariffs could knock off as much as 1 percentage point of India's GDP growth. But others say India primarily has a domestic-focused economy, and therefore it is much less exposed than more export-oriented countries like China or countries in Southeast Asia. Semiconductors, consumer electronics like phones, and pharmaceuticals are exempt for now from these reciprocal and secondary tariffs, but they are covered by separate sector-specific tariffs. But the overall rate of 50% makes India among the worst-hit countries under Trump's tariff war. India is now on par with Brazil at 50%, but it's much higher than China at 30% and neighboring countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, which are at 20% or below.
The president has applied aggressive economic leverage, for example, the secondary tariffs on India, to try to make it harder for the Russians to get rich from their oil economy. He's tried to make it clear that Russia can be reinvited into the world economy if they stop the killing, but they're going to continue to be isolated if they don't stop the killing.
I hear what you're saying about India. China is actually the largest buyer of Russian oil.
They're
Why
close.
No
they're about equal.
Why no sanctions on China?
Well, obviously, we have a 54% tariff on the PRC right now, so we've already applied pretty hefty sanctions on the Chinese.
Meanwhile, the Indian government has been making overtures both to Russia and China. Prime Minister Modi is all set to make his first visit to China in 7 years this weekend. He will be there to attend the upcoming SCO summit. Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar last week was in Moscow. There, he encouraged Russian companies to engage more intensively with India. Some Indian officials believe that the current stalemate reflects a cooling of personal ties between Modi and Trump. Trump has been ranting against American manufacturers shipping jobs away to India and China. In fact, he recently threatened Apple for shifting some of its manufacturing to India. India had become the largest manufacturer of Apple iPhones in these last 6 months. Trump even mocked India's economy is dead. He even quoted India's biggest rival, Pakistan, by hosting its army chief, Asim Munir, for lunch at the White House.
It's funny you have people who work for a pro-business American administration accusing other people of doing business. Okay, that's really curious. But here's the point: if you have a problem buying oil from India, oil or refined products, don't buy it. Nobody forced you to buy it. I mean, but Europe buys, America buys. So you don't like it, don't buy it.
The extraordinary tariff of 50% puts India at a disadvantage in the global trading order, particularly compared to China and other neighbors which have substantially lower tariffs. Trump has declared a ceasefire with China, which has a more than $1 trillion global surplus and is considered the principal antagonist in Trump's trade war. So in that context, the 50% tariff on India risks undermining a key ally and a strategic partner of the United States. Also, American importers in recent years had tried to shift some of their manufacturing to India to lessen their dependency on Chinese factories. India's energy imports from America have also reached $6.5 billion in the first 6 months of 2025. That's a 70% jump over the same period last year. Similarly, India's imports from Russia seem to have halved from about 1.8 million barrels per day at the top end to now just about 1 million barrels per day. But that doesn't seem to have counted for much in Trump's scheme of things. India's economy, already one of the 5 biggest in the world and is expected to join the United States and China as the top 3 in the next few years, has weathered other storms in the past. The global financial crisis of 2008 did relatively little damage to India, which depended far less on international capital back then than most big countries. But India in 2025 is much more integrated in the world economy, and the disruption that the new tariffs have caused is already being felt. But more than the trade wars and the trade disruption, it's the damage that's been done to the trust between the Indian and American governments that is broken, possibly beyond repair. That relationship was cultivated by diplomats and policymakers from both sides for more than 25 years. That has now been thrown into the bonfire of Trump's vanities.